Thanks everyone for joining me. Right now, at this exact moment, 60% of our nation's oil imports, the very lifeblood of our physical economy, the fuel that keeps the lights on, the factories running, and the supply chains moving across every state in this union, is suddenly at profound risk. Make no mistake. 60%. And why? Because the political establishment in Washington, completely intoxicated by its own imperial delusion, just tried to place a 10-year, unyielding contractual chokehold around the neck of a sovereign neighbor. And they were publicly, completely, and humiliatingly told to their faces, no. Let me be clear. Let me be absolutely clear about the catastrophic arrogance we just witnessed today. President Trump picked up the phone, called Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, and delivered what the White House had the absolute audacity to describe as a generous favor. But it wasn't a favor. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a mafia-style demand for total, unquestioning institutional subordination. They genuinely demanded, that Canada contractually guarantee 3.8 million barrels of crude oil every single day. They demanded 2.7 billion cubic feet of natural gas per day. They demanded 1,400 megawatts of electricity per hour. And that still wasn't enough for them, because the insatiable greed of our ruling establishment never stops at simply taking the resources. They demanded strict price caps. They demanded that a sovereign nation legally surrender its fundamental right to govern its own resources, threatening them with staggering $500 million monthly financial penalties if they dared to step out of line. This is the sickness of a ruling class that has lost its grip on reality. I've seen firsthand how this system operates. They believe the entire world, much like the American working class, exists simply to be extracted from, exploited, and rigidly controlled without consequence. They genuinely believe they could bully a long-standing ally into becoming nothing more than a captive supplier state. They thought they could snap their manicured fingers and dictate the terms of economic survival for another country with the exact same ruthless entitlement they used to dictate the terms of survival for working families right here at home. But that delusion just shattered on the world stage. The house is on fire, and the establishment architects who poured the gasoline are standing around acting completely shocked that they got burned. They demanded absolute ironclad security for their corporate backers, while offering zero stability, zero respect, and zero sovereignty in return. Make no mistake, what happened today was not just a rejection of a bad trade deal. It was the total collapse of a captive market. It was a global broadcast that the days of the American political elite bullying their way to economic dominance are dead and gone. And because of their staggering hubris, it is the everyday, working-class American who is about to pay the ultimate price. Let us break down exactly what this so-called deal actually was. Let us pull back the curtain on this proposal, because we need to call it what it was. It was a trap. The establishment in Washington did not go to Ottawa seeking a partnership. They did not go seeking mutual prosperity or a fair exchange. They went seeking a hostage. Think about the sheer, unadulterated arrogance required to put this piece of paper on the table. Accepting Trump's deal would have meant total institutional subordination for our neighbors to the north. It would have meant signing away their sovereign rights to their own natural resources. It would have meant systematically stripping away every single ounce of their leverage, eliminating any ability they have to fight back against future tariffs, future abuses, and the future whims of whatever billionaire or corporate proxy happens to be sitting in the Oval Office. Make no mistake, this is the exact same playbook the ruling class uses against the working people of this country every single day. Look at the parallels. They demand maximum output from you. They lock you into fixed, stagnant wages, or in this geopolitical case, rigid international price caps. And they methodically strip away your leverage, your ability to strike, your ability to negotiate, your ability to stand up and say, we deserve better. The political establishment does not want partners in this world, just like they do not want empowered workers in this country. They want subservience. They demand maximum security for their corporate profit margins and their political legacies, while offering absolutely zero stability or respect to the people actually producing the wealth and the resources. But Prime Minister Carney did not just say no. He didn't just politely decline and walk away from the table. He stood before the world and performed a surgical, undeniable public vivisection of the American bully's playbook. He exposed the fundamental rot at the heart of our foreign policy for every single nation on earth to see. Let me be clear about what was revealed to the globe today. A contract that legally removes your ability to respond to another party's future bad behavior is not a peace agreement. It is not a trade deal. It is institutionalized defenselessness. It is capitulation with a 10-year guarantee attached. Why on earth would any sovereign people agree to that? Why would anyone sign away their right to self-determination just to appease a ruling class that views them as nothing more than an extraction zone? The answer is they wouldn't. And today they didn't. Washington operates on the fatal, outdated assumption that because they hold the biggest stick, everyone else must simply fall in line. They govern by ego. They govern by threat. They govern by a pathological need to dominate. What the rejection we saw from Carney today was a masterclass in drawing a line in the sand against systemic arrogance. The establishment's trap was set, but the target refused to step inside. And now, the panic in the halls of power is just beginning. Look at the immediate aftermath. Look at the ego-driven, reckless fantasy pushed out on social media the second this administration realized they had been publicly humiliated. President Trump gets on his phone and types out to the world that America does not need Canadian energy. He casually tells our biggest supplier to go sell to China and see how that works. Let me be clear. Let me be absolutely clear. That is not a negotiating strategy. That is a dangerous, delusional lie told by a political establishment desperate to cover up its own catastrophic failure. They want you to believe we are insulated. They want you to believe their political bluster protects us from the consequences of their arrogance. But the financial markets knew the truth within 15 minutes. The market does not care about political ego. The market prices in raw reality, and the reality we saw today is an absolute bloodbath. Within minutes, literally minutes, West Texas Intermediate crude futures skyrocketed 7.2%. Natural gas for Midwest delivery spiked over 14%. And the shares of the very American refineries that keep this country moving completely collapsed. Valero down 11%. Phillips 66 down 9%. Marathon Petroleum plummeting 13% in a single hour. Make no mistake, these are not just abstract numbers on a ticker tape. These are not just bad days for Wall Street speculators. This is the sound of the American industrial engine stalling out because of sheer political hubris. The political elites tweeting from their secure offices have no idea, none, how the physical economy of this nation actually works. I promise you I will always call out this establishment blindness. 60% of our oil imports come from Canada. And it is not just about price or proximity. It is about physical infrastructure. Our refineries in the Midwest, our refineries down on the Gulf Coast, these massive multi-billion-dollar facilities were explicitly engineered to process Canadian heavy crude. You cannot just flip a switch and process a different type of oil from halfway across the world. It would take billions of dollars and years of engineering work to reconfigure those plants. Who do you think is going to pay for that? Do you think the establishment politicians are going to pay for it? Do you think the corporate executives are going to take a pay cut to shield you from the fallout? Absolutely not. It is the working families of this country who will bear the brutal brunt of this ego trip. It is the working class parents who are going to see the price of a gallon of gas completely decimate their weekly grocery budget. It is the truck drivers whose livelihoods depend on affordable diesel. It is the tens of thousands of American refinery workers whose jobs are suddenly on the chopping block because their equipment has been intentionally starved of the exact crude oil it was built to refine. They lie to protect their bruised egos, and they send you the bill. The ground truth is that we are dependent on this energy, and by treating our sovereign partners like disposable subordinates, they have put a match to our own economic security. I want you to really think about 4 words. 4 of the most consequential words spoken in modern North American diplomacy. When Mark Carney stood at that podium and looked directly into the camera, he didn't just reject a bad deal. He announced a structural revolution. He looked at the American establishment and he said, "The United States is welcome to compete. Make no mistake about it." Those 4 words were a geopolitical earthquake. They shattered the illusion of empire. That was not a diplomatic threat. That was a brutal, undeniable market announcement. It was the absolute death knell of the American monopoly. For decades, for generations, the political establishment in this country operated under a fatal delusion of absolute entitlement. They assumed Canadian energy would always flow south, simply because they believed there was nowhere else for it to go. They assumed they permanently owned the market. They treated our neighbors exactly the way corporate monopolies treat a captive consumer base, with total disregard and bottomless greed. But let me be clear. While Washington was busy demanding fealty, while they were arrogantly plotting 10-year traps and threatening financial penalties, the rest of the world was actually building relationships. Canada is not bluffing. They just slammed 11 documented purchase proposals from 4 different continents right down on the table. 11 sovereign nations, from China, Japan, and India, to Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. These are countries ready and willing to buy the exact resources that our out-of-touch leaders just threw away out of sheer blinding arrogance. And do not let the talking heads on cable television lie to you. Do not let the corporate pundits tell you that redirecting this energy is a logistical impossibility. Because the infrastructure's already being funded. They have NATO-backed infrastructure projects practically ready to break ground. We are talking about brand new, state-of-the-art export terminals on both the Pacific and the Atlantic coasts. They are physically building a parallel economic highway, completely bypassing the United States and giving themselves the permanent ability to sell to Europe and Asia on their own terms. This is the fundamental lesson in power that our ruling class absolutely refuses to learn. What is true leverage? Let me tell you what it is not. Leverage in the 21st century does not come from having the largest military budget on the planet. It does not come from screaming the loudest on social media or throwing temper tantrums online. And it certainly does not come from some divine ordained right of political entitlement. True leverage comes from one thing and one thing only: having credible alternatives. The era of assumed American preferential access is dead. It is over. We just watched a structural dependency get converted into a competitive market in real time. We are no longer the only buyer in town. We have been placed on equal footing with the rest of the world, and our ruling elite is utterly terrified. They are terrified because for the first time in decades, they cannot just demand submission. They actually have to earn their place at the table. We are witnessing a monumental geopolitical shift, and our leaders are completely blind to it. They are acting like 19th century feudal lords, demanding tribute from sovereign nations in a 21st century, highly competitive, multipolar world. Let me be clear. You cannot govern a modern, interconnected globe with the arrogant, out-of-touch mindset of an emperor. The world has moved on, but Washington is fundamentally stuck in a dangerous delusion of its own making. They are treating international diplomacy like a corporate hostile takeover, and the entire globe is watching it fail spectacularly. Make no mistake about what happens next if this establishment refuses to wake up and accept reality. We are staring directly down the barrel of a full-blown crisis escalation scenario. This is not some abstract geopolitical theory. This is basic, brutal economic arithmetic. When Canada inevitably redirects just 30% of its current oil exports to those 11 eager buyers in Asia and Europe, what do you think happens right here at home? I will tell you exactly what happens. We will see massive unfillable supply shortfalls hitting our Midwest and Gulf Coast refineries. Let me paint a very real, very terrifying picture of this crisis for you. What happens when the independent truckers cannot afford the diesel to deliver basic goods to your local grocery store? What happens when American manufacturing plants have to lay off thousands of workers because their energy overhead just doubled in the span of a single month? The working class of this country will be financially crushed under the suffocating weight of an entirely manufactured, totally avoidable domestic energy shortage. And when that sheer economic agony hits, when you are paying double at the pump, when heating your home in the winter becomes an impossible luxury, watch exactly what the political elite does. Watch them closely. They will point fingers. They will blame the global market. They will blame foreign governments. They will blame anyone and everyone but themselves. They will never ever admit that their own reckless ego, their own desperate need to politically dominate an ally, is what actually burned down our economic security. This has to stop. We are at an absolute breaking point. I am telling you right now that we must demand a fundamental structural reckoning in how this country operates on the world stage. We cannot survive in a highly competitive global economy acting like a schoolyard bully whose bluff just got called by the entire playground. We have to earn our partnerships. We have to treat our allies with actual, tangible respect. Not the fake, conditional respect of a corporate boardroom, but the genuine, mutual respect of sovereign equals. Respect must be earned. It cannot be mandated by political threats. It cannot be extracted through half-billion-dollar penalty clauses. And it absolutely cannot be dictated on a Tuesday afternoon phone call by an establishment that thinks international diplomacy is a reality television show. The world just looked the American establishment dead in the eye and said no. Now, it is time for the American working class to look at that same corrupt, arrogant establishment. Look at the total disaster they have engineered and deliver that exact same word. No more. The illusion of empire is over. It is time to wake up.